Welcome to the beginning of my complete chronological rewatch, where I'll be going back through almost every Star Wars film and show as I work my way to the Rise of Skywalker. I'll be excluding most things that I've already gone through and reviewed on this channel, like Tales of the Jedi and Bad Batch Season 2. But other than that, I'll be covering most other visual stories. This will be a once-a-week series, unless something comes up and it's replaced with another video for the week. But I'm very excited to go back through a lot of movies and episodes that I haven't seen in a while. Today, we're starting with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Released in 1999, the movie follows Obi-Wan Kenobi, a young apprentice Jedi Knight under the tutelage of Qui-Gon Jinn, and Anakin Skywalker, who will later father Luke Skywalker and become known as Darth Vader, but is now just a 9-year-old boy. When the Trade Federation cuts off all routes to the planet Naboo, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are assigned to settle the matter. I know this movie gets a lot of hate, but every time I watch it, I remember just how much I really do love these films. It may be because I rewatch them so little now that they always feel fresh and new to me, but this and Attack of the Clones, which is next in my rewatch, always surprise me and exceed any expectations I have coming in. Even though this is a review technically, I'll mainly be going through the film and just talking about a lot of the details that I love about the movie. First off, I don't want this to sound like a shot at the sequels, but it's so nice to have the Fox intro at the beginning. It's become so nostalgic to me and reminds me of watching these films growing up on repeat. I could spend this entire video talking about how great John Williams' score is, but I'll just get it out of the way here. Whether it's Duel of the Fates or just a background melody during a scene, every piece of music he creates is brilliant. I love how intricate and detailed all the sets and props are, especially when it comes to things like the spaceships or pod racers. Nothing was glossed over during production. And both the visual and practical effects for the movie were really ahead of their time. There are a few that look a bit wacky compared to what's being made today, like some of the underwater scenes, but a lot of them still hold up. Jar Jar still looks like I could reach out and touch him, and really all of the other aliens and creatures throughout the movie as well. I think when you compare this to some other films that came out maybe only a decade earlier, there's a dramatic difference. Some of the costumes can be a bit boring and bland, but there are specific ones, like Queen Amidala's wardrobe, that just stand out every time they're on frame. Even though he might not be a master of dialogue, Lucas knew how to get great cinematic shots. Naboo is a beautiful setting for the film, contrasted against the more murky swamps of the Gungans, and I love how colorful so much of the film is. It really makes it feel like a different time period where the galaxy is a better place. Even though this is the only movie he appears in, Qui-Gon has always been one of my favorite Jedi because of the way he separates himself from and comes into conflict with the Jedi Council, so he's always something I look forward to when I rewatch the film. He's got some great quotes, and Liam Neeson's acting is solid throughout. Jar Jar's introduction and them running into each other is a bit goofy and feels out of place, but I think I've always liked Jar Jar more than most. His unique speech pattern can be fun to play around with, and he's still a good source of comedic relief, even though he is very different from the way the droids were used for comedy in the original trilogy. The Neimoidians are introduced early on, and for some reason, they're weird and I love it. I wouldn't consider them my favorite alien species, not by a long shot, but there's something about the species that I look forward to seeing. And Tae Hao is a great character who I always enjoy listening to. The action on the Federation battleship instantly hooks the audience, and something Lucas does with the dialogue that I really do like is that he never takes the time to explain elements that wouldn't need to be explained in-universe. He just assumes the audience will accept it and move on, helping add to the realism despite it being a galaxy far, far away. I know I'm kind of all over the place, but I love the political elements we get in the film. It immediately opens up with a trade blockade, and the entire plot is based off of the Queen going to the Senate to have them take action against this. And yet some fans still complain about Star Wars being made political nowadays. We are later taken to the underwater Gungan city, and I love the way the bright lights contrast the dark void of the ocean. I've never been a huge Boss Nass fan, but he's got a fun design that separates him from the other Gungans. Once the story moves back to the Naboo, there were a few moments where the sound effects for the droids sounds more like a video game, which did catch me off guard, but it wasn't too often. I love the small hints along the way that the Queen of Naboo actually isn't the one who's dressed up to look like her, and when Padme finally steps up and reveals herself later in the film, I love seeing everyone's reaction to it. The action between the Jedi and the droids felt a bit repetitive at times for me, at least when we're initially on Naboo, but I think that's solved the second time around when they're having to fight Maul while the Naboo fight the droids. We're introduced to R2 for the first time as a hero, and then we see Darth Maul for the first time in hologram form by the side of Sidious. Once we get to Tatooine, I love how unique the architecture and culture there feels, and even though some feel that it has been an overused location recently, I do really like it in this movie. We're finally introduced to a young Anakin, and while the dialogue isn't great, it's more bearable than I remember. I thought some of the acting was actually pretty great, and he does a good job of embodying a 9-year-old boy. We quickly see how capable and knowledgeable he is, and Padme's curiosity about the planet helps create an opportunity for an exposition dump by Anakin. Something that I found interesting about Padme during her time as a handmaiden in the movie is that, at least while on Tatooine, she really seems to bring down the mood a lot. I know she's worried about her people, and in a hurry to get to the Senate, but it's just an observation that I had. Another thing I noticed, more about myself than the movie, was that because most stories nowadays are during the Empire's reign, when the Jedi are in hiding, I found myself in the mindset while on Tatooine that Qui-Gon needed to hide the fact that he is a Jedi. Even though he does a bit just to avoid attention, I never realized I was thinking this way until Watto just passes off the fact that he's trying to do a mind trick on him. At this point, I was really enjoying the movie, but once we get to Tatooine, everything really started to drag for me. There's a lot of dialogue and explanation, and I did find myself bored until we got to the Boonta Eve pod race. I love how grand of a spectacle it is. There's a wide variety of aliens, it's a very fast and fun sequence, and I really liked the tracking shots while introducing some of the racers. Sebulba's a neat villain that tests Anakin physically and emotionally, and I would like to see what he did after the race in future stories. Aurra Singh's cameo during the race is neat, but it's so very pointless. I have no idea why it was included. Jabba and Bib Fortuna look much paler in this than I remember, but I like how the Hutts are established as a major power outside of the Republic space. Afterward, Shmi and Anakin's separation is much more emotional than I remember, and I love the faint music playing in the background for the entire scene. Shmi is a great character, and we need more stories about her. Darth Maul's first few appearances aren't as grand or badass as I remember them being, but I love the moment where he drops off the sand dune on his way to fight the Jedi, and his duel with Qui-Gon is just enough of a tease to get us excited, although I've never really understood why there was such a sense of urgency with Qui-Gon and Anakin and why we cut to them running towards the ship, unless he actually is aware of Maul coming and I just didn't catch it. We get to Coruscant, and once again the setting looks amazing, and so very detailed. We see some of the Jedi cast off the chance that the Sith have returned, and I think after seeing Tales of the Jedi and how this affected Dooku, I'll always watch the movie in a new way, knowing that all of these events cemented Dooku in the dark side. I also found it interesting that Mace Windu is aware of the Chosen One prophecy, even though Dooku and Qui-Gon were two of the only Jedi to really care about the prophecies at all. I also love the look that Windu gives when Qui-Gon is allowed to bring Anakin before them, as if he's done this with dozens of other kids that he claims to be the Chosen One, and Windu is just tired of his BS. There are also some great master and apprentice moments throughout the film between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. I love the battle in Naboo, and the way the droid army is introduced coming over the hill in such a menacing fashion. The Gungan side of the battle is actually quite silly when you look at the fights going on in the background. Anakin goes up to fight in space, and this is the first time we see him bend the rules. One of his famous tendencies in the Clone Wars that he passes to Ahsoka is do what the Council tells him to, but how he does it is a different story, and this couldn't be more true in this scenario. And then, we've got Duel of the Fates. This definitely isn't my favorite lightsaber duel, but I do love the meaning behind it and what this means for the rest of the galaxy, which most of you probably saw explained by Dave Filoni in that famous clip from a while back. This duel actually felt longer for me than it actually was, probably just because of the cutting to other groups while the music continues to play. Qui-Gon's death always hits hard, especially since it comes at a time when everyone seems to be losing. I love the parallel in music between Qui-Gon's funeral and Padme's, indicating the beginning and end of the fall of the Republic, and there's also a lot of teases about Palpatine that I think would be fun for a first-time watcher going in chronological order instead of release order. So yeah, that is my detailed thoughts on the Phantom Menace after rewatching it. This was a lot longer than I intended it to be, but I wanted to get through all of the notes that I took while watching the movie. Next is Attack of the Clones, and hopefully I can be much more clear and concise with my thoughts. For that one, and cut down by a few minutes. Let me know what you think of The Phantom Menace in the comments below, and where it ranks among your favorite Star Wars films. Remember to like the video, and subscribe to stay up to date with my chronological rewatch. As always, thank you all for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.